Welcome to the first edition of a new feature for Spooky Ventures called Spooky Reviews. And in this edition, we're going to be looking at a made for TV movie from 1973 called Horror at 37,000 Feet. Now, you might wonder why I'm starting with a movie from 73. Well, the fact of the matter is, I probably have seen it when it first came out, but I don't really remember. And I'll tell you why I think I've seen it before. But in any event, a lot of times these made-for-TV movies just sort of aired and then kind of disappeared. And so I'm betting it's a good chance that a lot of you folks out there have seen the movie or not seen the movie, but have never heard of it or you've completely forgotten it. So it seems worth doing a little review section on it and talking about the movie. Now, first off, I said that I probably have seen it, and that's probably true in that I was 10 years old when it came out, and not only was William Shatner in it, and as a huge Star Trek fan, I followed pretty much everything he did, but the the actress who plays the little girl in it, Mia Bendixson, was a pen pal of mine at the time. At least I think she was at that point. I know we were pen pals for a long time when we were kids. So I watched pretty much everything she did too. So I had kind of double reason to see this movie. I have a hunch I probably just literally forgot about it over the years. Now, let's talk first off about the cast of the film. If you were to go out and try to make a movie and just get as many 60s stars as you could, 60s TV stars, I can't imagine you do much better than this. You've got the Beverly Hillbillies represented because Buddy Ebsen's in there. Gilligan's Island's represented because Russell Johnson, the professor, is in there. I mentioned William Shatner from Star Trek. Roy Thinnis from the cult show The Invaders, which is an excellent show. I was a huge fan of that. Chuck Connors from The Rifleman. So, I mean, there are a lot of really great people from 60s shows on there. And I have a hunch that was part of the selling factor of the film. But the story's actually pretty good too. So we'll get to that in just a minute. So let's talk about the story. The setup is that Roy Thinnis and his wife he's an architect, and they own a property that has an old abbey on it in England. And they want to ship that abbey to the United States and reassemble it on their property there. So they've torn it apart, got it into shipping containers, and they're loading it onto the plane to take it to England. Well, because they probably couldn't get it all on one plane otherwise, they rented out a plane and to be a special flight. It's not a regular flight. And did I mention it's also summer solstice? So in any event, they've rented out this plane. There aren't a lot of tickets for the plane because it's an extra flight. Now that brings up an interesting point. When I first heard about the movie, I thought there would be a lot of claustrophobic scenes. I mean, you got a horror film on a airplane, and there really aren't because there aren't many passengers on the plane because it was an extra flight, number one. And number two, I never flew back then, but for those who did, I don't know how accurate this is, but the plane looks very roomy compared to what airplanes are these days. So it really avoids the whole claustrophobic thing. Which, that was a method, one way of going about the horror they could have done, but they didn't do it. It's cool because they did a good job with what they did. Another thing they avoided was the whole viewing the horror of whatever it is factor. Now, part of that might have been budget. I mean, keep in mind, this was apparently a fairly low budget film. I'm guessing that a lot of the budget went to the cast. And that didn't leave a lot of money for special effects. And what special effects there are have a tendency towards being cheesy, or at least very simple. But the thing is, by doing that, having the terror or the horror more off-camera than on, it almost tends to be scarier because your own mind will come up with better things to scare you than what they could ever put out there, especially on a low budget. And I think the filmmakers realize that. And it's really a good thing that they went that route. So what happens is this abbey is apparently haunted, and the entities that are haunting it are brought aboard the plane. You can tell that very early on when they're first loading the containers up, there's some sounds that kind of give you the impression that something's not right here. And it gets, more horrifying and more horrifying as time goes on, the threat being real. Some of the characters actually do die before it's all over. I'm not going to go into spoilers by telling you which ones. But, in any event, it is a very frightening film, for what they did. And it's actually a very convincing film. Oh, I should also mention Paul Winfield, who a lot of people might know for playing Captain Tyrrell in Star Trek The Wrath of Khan. He's in this movie, and his character is probably the most likable one in the movie, because all the characters, other than the little girl Jodie, all the characters have a tendency towards, at least the more well-developed characters. The stewardesses, you really don't know a lot about their characters, nor do you know a lot about the flight crew, really. But the flight crew characters do tend to be a little more developed. But in any event, of the more developed characters, Winfield's character, I would say, is probably the most likable of the bunch. And he pulls off an amazing performance. Just so strong. There's one character I really didn't like in the film. He's just pretty annoying. But you watch it, you'll see for yourself who that is. I think you probably have the same impression. In any event, they do this. It's almost more of a suspense film, but there is the whole supernatural side to it. And there's a lot more to the story than you might think, too. There are a couple themes that seem to be trying to be represented here. I'm not quite sure what the message about those themes are, but there seems to be a theme of science or technology versus the spiritual world of demons and witches and things like that. And I'm not really sure who wins in the end. It's almost a draw in a way. So I don't know whether they were trying to make a message with that. And this is based on a story. I've not read the story. Perhaps that goes into more detail or is more effective at getting the message across. I wouldn't mind looking it up and reading it, although it might not be the easiest thing to find at this point. At least not online, and I'm not sure when it was published, but obviously sometime before 73 might not be that easy to find. But the other theme that they seem to be trying to get across is something to do with faith and losing one's faith, and perhaps looking for a sign of faith, and maybe getting it, maybe not. And again, I'm not quite sure what the message of that is, but it seems pretty apparent that that was something intended with the film too. So, while it could have been just an easy thing of gathering up a bunch of stars, putting together a made-for-TV movie, and getting people to tune in for views, especially when you make it really creepy, I kind of think they went the extra mile a little bit, and there's more to the movie than that, which, hey, kudos for that. Don't expect this to be a modern, high-budget film, but honestly, a lot of those old 70s made-for-TV horror movies are actually pretty good, and this is a classic example of that. I would highly recommend getting out there and checking it out. I don't know if it's going to be there forever, but right now it's on YouTube. We've actually got it on the playlist for our YouTube channel under Spooky Movies. And the day I post this as live, I'll also post that on the main page at spookyventures.com, so you can check that out there. I think it's an hour and 15 minutes roughly, and I think it's well worth the time. It's a fun movie. It's entertaining. And as we're getting into the spooky time of year, and for me, as I've mentioned before, all year is pretty spooky. At least I like the spooky stuff all year round. But I know for a lot of people, this time of year, once it gets into September and October, is when their thoughts turn to horror movies and stuff. So frankly, perfect timing for you. Just get out there and onto YouTube and look for it. Horror at 37,000 Feet. Like I said, take a look at our playlist. You'll find it there. And have a look. And hey, if you've seen it, or if you watch it again and want to leave some comments on the video to telling us what you think, please feel free to do that. We'd love to hear what you think. Always looking forward to get some feedback. And share this video, share all of our videos, look around our YouTube channel. We're planning to add a lot of great stuff coming up. Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.